Here's a rather good and interesting article from FIRE. If you don't know who FIRE are, they are the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, but they've also added a little "and expression" at the end there as well. And this is them talking about Harvard, because as we all know, universities have not been a good place for freedom of speech for quite some time now. Harvard gets worst score ever in FIRE's college free speech rankings. Harvard is consistently ranked as one of the best universities in the United States, but FIRE frequently finds itself in the odd position of giving this all-star academic school failing grades. Simply put, Harvard has never performed well in FIRE's college free speech rankings, finishing below 75% of the schools surveyed in each of the past 4 years. In 2020, Harvard ranked 46 out of 55 schools. In 2021, it ranked 130 out of 154 schools. Last year, it ranked 170 out of 203 schools. And this year, Harvard completed its downward spiral in dramatic fashion, coming in dead last with the worst score ever, 0 out of a possible 100. This earns it the notorious distinction of being the only school ranked this year with an abysmal speech climate. So basically, it's an absolute control over what you're allowed to produce, what you're allowed to learn, which I thought was not the job of a university. I thought universities were places you could discuss and learn about everything. Instead, you're paying massive amounts of money. Harvard, I think, is the most expensive. I believe, don't quote me on that. I know it's one of the most expensive schools by far, just so that you can get propagandized and get I don't know, feminist interpretive dance, whatever, their jobs in that, aye. What's more, granting Harvard a score of 0 is generous. Its actual score is minus 10.69, more than 6 standard deviations below the average and more than 2 standard deviations below the second to last school in the rankings. Its Ivy League counterpart, the University of Pennsylvania, Penn obtained an overall score of 11.13. This raises the question, why did Harvard do so poorly? In light of its historically low rankings, the reasons are many. Bad across the board. First of all, Harvard, which on paper commits to protecting free speech, has a dismal record of responding to deplatforming attempts to sanction students, student groups, scholars, and speakers for speech protected under the First Amendment standards. Of 9 attempts in total over the past 5 years, 7 resulted in sanction. For each of these 7 incidents, Harvard was penalised in the rankings. From 2019 to this year, Harvard sanctioned 4 scholars, 3 of whom it terminated. In 2020, Harvard revoked conservative student activist Kyle Kashev's acceptance over comments he made on social media as a 16-year-old, for which he has since apologised. In 2022, Harvard disinvited feminist philosopher Devin Buckley from an English department colloquium on campus over her views on gender and trans issues. In 2019, Harvard was the site of a substantial event disruption when protesters interrupted a joint talk featuring former Harvard President Lawrence S. Bacco and Graduate School of Education Dean Bridget Terry Long by occupying the stage and refusing to leave. Harvard also performed very poorly on a number of the survey-based components of the college free speech rankings, ranking 193 out of 254 on comfort expressing ideas, 183 on administrative support, and 198 on disruptive conduct. I mean, it sounds like they're performing very, very poorly in actually getting people ready for the world when they cost so fucking much. For instance, just... Sorry, I've missed a wee bit. This is reflected in student survey responses. For instance, just over a quarter of Harvard students reported they are comfortable publicly disagreeing with their professor on a controversial political topic. Just over a quarter. Only roughly a third think it is very or extremely clear the administration protects speech on campus, and an alarming 30% think using violence to stop campus speech is at least rarely acceptable, an increase from the 26% of Harvard students who felt this way last year. Only time will tell if Harvard can climb out of the hole it has dug it for itself over the past 5 years, but one thing's for sure, it must start with promoting free expression on campus, making room for more speech, not less. Trends over the last 4 years of Harvard's data are troubling as well. For starters, self-censorship is steadily on the rise. That's for people who just basically keep their opinions to themselves because they know if they voice their true opinions, it will get them in a lot of trouble. With the percentage of Harvard students who say they self-censor on campus fairly often or very often education, increasing from 16% 2 years ago to 22% last year and 24% this year. So basically, a quarter of the students of Harvard, one of the biggest, most famous universities in the world, will not say their true opinions. They self-censor. They stay quiet. I mean, doesn't really sound like a good university. Oh, stuff, yeah, this place you go to learn and talk about stuff. Yeah, well, we can't learn or talk about that stuff. We get it specially selected what we're allowed to learn and talk about. That's propagandized. You're paying a lot of money and you're going to put yourself in debt for a very long time to get propagandized. You're paying to be turned into a good little citizen. Over the past 4 years, abortion in particular has become increasingly difficult to discuss on campus, perhaps due to its increasing prominence in the public conversation following the overturning of Roe v. Wade. You're welcome. In 2022, 35% of Harvard students identified abortion as a difficult topic to have an open and honest conversation about on campus, because the way that the leftists work is you either agree with us or we're going to attack you, we're going to get you kicked out, we're going to, socially ostracize you, like all of that other stuff. So for a lot of people, it's just simply not worth that headache, But if you don't get your degree, you still have to pay your fucking student loan back. So people just keep their mouth shut, keep their head down and try and get their degree, which is the advice that I usually give to people until things get better. This percentage dipped to 29% the following year, then increased to 39% last year and to 46% this year. Last but not least, Harvard speech policies leave a lot to be desired. The school earns Fire's yellow light rating, indicating that it maintains policies that restrict some amount of protected expression, or that by virtue of their vague wording, Harvard could easily use to restrict protected expression. For instance, Harvard requires students to be civil when using computers and networks. What does that mean by civil? Who fucking knows? Whatever Harvard needs it to mean in the moment. Because I guarantee you, if someone went on it and started going, white people, blah, 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 that person would probably get tenure. Whereas if someone says something like, I'm very worried about the border, that's them kicked out. Oh, by the way, you still need to pay back that 600 grand you owe in student loans. No degree, 600 grand, yeah, good luck making that at McDonald's. Solutions and silver linings. Harvard's consistently poor performance over the past 4 years in Fire's college free speech rankings reveals a serious problem at one of America's most prestigious institutions. Even in a hypothetical world in which every school Fire surveyed earned a green light rating for its speech policies, Harvard would still come in dead last with a score of 4.31 and would trail the next school in the rankings by almost 22 points. This means Harvard cannot solve this problem by simply improving its speech code policies and paying lip service to supporting freedom of speech, academic freedom, and open inquiry on campus. It must consistently walk the walk by enforcing pro-speech Sorry, I get so tongue-tied all the time. This is why it takes so long to film main channel videos. By enforcing pro-speech policies as well as creating them, by refusing to cave to sanction attempts, and by changing the culture from one of self-censorship and fear to one of self-expression and courageous conversation. One of the philosophical foundations of empirical science is that any idea, no matter how well established as the truth, is still subject to challenge. In the past, many respected scholars have thought that it is true the world is flat, that humans and other primates do not share a common ancestor, and that stress causes ulcers. Each of the ideas has been refuted, but many of the refutations faced attempted suppression before eventually finding footing and becoming mainstream. That's true. A lot of things that were shouted down and, basically the person was demonized and kicked out of whatever institution they were in, etc., etc., turned out to be correct. How did they find out whether or not it was correct? Because people were able to fucking talk about it. People were able to talk about it and research it. The university went, okay, this is a very contentious topic, but we're going to give a little bit of a grant to this research department so we can get to the bottom of it. Because there are questions that need answered. So see if you wanted to but as soon as anything like race and we will answer all questions. We're a university. We find this out. Race and IQ. Almost any question. Almost anything. That's how it starts, where they basically... There are things where there are questions worthy of being answered, but because they are uncomfortable topics that make our students feel afraid. You're afraid of the truth, are you? Well, what are you afraid of? I would want the correct answer being out there. I mean, science is supposed to be accurate. That's why people have this infallible belief in science. because science is so correct. But if you take this part away, where there are certain things you're not allowed to discuss and not allowed to question, then science, you know, kind of loses that prestige that it has about being correct all the time, doesn't it? I don't like this age we're getting in where it's like, I don't really trust science. I mean, there's certain things that you know for a fact. You can demonstrate them. You can do them yourself in your house. There are certain things that you know for a fact. But see, whenever I see reports coming out, I always kind of go, what were the politics of the person behind this? Were they left-wing? Okay, well then this study has a left-wing swing. Were they right-wing? Okay, this study has a right-wing swing. You can't trust it now because politics has infected science. Science should be about objective fact. What is true? What can you demonstrate? Can you repeat these results? All that type of thing. That is what science is supposed to be. But then someone's went, well, this says something that politically I don't like, so I'm going to fudge a lot of the data, which a guy just got fired for because it turns out that he'd been doing that for like 20 years. And his studies are cited in like massive things that have appeared in like, what was it, medical journals and social journals and shit like that. So it turns out that all of that could be fake because it's backed by incorrect data because someone let their personal politics interfere with actual science. Right, that's the problem. However, I do feel that this is by intent. This reveals that restrictions on free expression and academic freedom, whether by administrative fear or social pressure, are as limiting as they are often ultimately futile. Stifling conversation only makes it more difficult to pursue truth. Harvard, of all places, should recognise this and refuse to stand for it. Its motto is Veritas, after all. If this prestigious university hopes to turn things around, it should reflect on its traditional scholarly purpose and direct its attention towards reviving the free speech norms that make fulfilling that purpose possible. In doing so, it may build off its relative success in the few categories of the rankings in which it scored highly. Excuse me. Harvard students, for example, ranked 59 on tolerance for controversial liberal speakers and 39 on tolerance for controversial conservative speakers. Look at that difference. They also ranked 27 on mean tolerance, the average of tolerance for liberal and conservative speakers, and 97 on a measure of ideological favoritism. Tolerance difference, the difference between tolerance for liberal speakers and tolerance for conservative speakers. To be clear, Harvard students are still more tolerant of controversial liberal speakers than of conservative ones, but compared to most of the other colleges surveyed, this favouritism is not particularly strong. Perhaps Harvard can capitalise on its students' relatively similar levels of tolerance for liberal and conservative speakers by encouraging willing students to engage with viewpoints with which they disagree. And that's the thing is, if there's a viewpoint that you don't want to engage with, just fucking walk away. That's absolutely fine. Let the adults have a little chat about it then. But no, you won't even allow that. You'll come in with your megaphones and go, no justice, no peace, and give all that fucking shite when people are trying to have an academic discussion. Further, while the percentage of Harvard students who reported finding the topic of abortion difficult to discuss on campus increased over the past few years, the percentage who supported allowing a speaker on campus who previously expressed that abortion should be completely illegal increased from 47% in 2020 to 58% last year and this year. So that means still almost half of students are still like, no, this person shouldn't have a voice, they shouldn't speak. This indicates that a portion of Harvard students are open to hearing this view, perhaps believing such a speaker can spur the debate that they feel is currently too difficult to have openly on campus. Of course, even if such speakers do arrive on campus, the question remains, would they face a deplatforming attempt? They would. How would student organisers or Harvard's administration react if they did? If Harvard did not disinvite the speaker, would they have been able to successfully deliver their remarks? Given Harvard's recent history, these are the questions its students, faculty and administrators should be asking and proactively attempting to address. Only time will tell if Harvard can climb out of the hole it has dug for itself in the past 5 years, but one thing's for sure, it must start with promoting free expression on campus, making room for more speech, not less. However, it's not going to happen because this is working as intended. Basically, universities have always been a place for like left-wingers. It always has been, right? It's where, you know, the young person can stick on the Che Guevara shirt and get their Starbucks latte and their iPhone and cut around going, I actually don't have a problem with black people. That's nice, Jason. Nobody. What an odd thing to say out of nowhere. Like that type of thing, right? That's where they were. But what's happened is, you know, back in the 70s and all that shit, those people have grown up and they've got jobs at the universities because they like the nice left-wing cool, yeah, like places, right? They now control it, which means they are now the ones educating the next generation. So instead of your standard just left-wing hippie shit, which I guarantee, by the way, after about your first paycheck, a proper paycheck at a proper job, you fucking grow out of that shit right quick. How much in tax? Right, you grow out of that shit pretty quick. Don't worry about it. But the fact is, these people are now working in the universities, and the leftism has went through the roof. It's not your standard hippie shit now. It's total, yeah, we should like murder right wing and shit like that. Like, you're getting radical groups to the point where you're actually getting like undercover operations happening in universities because the feds are so concerned with left-wing radicals. Right? That's the thing you're getting now. It's got that bad. And people say, oh, these universities should change. Fire, I appreciate you're a great group. I think it's wonderful, the stuff that you're doing. You're basically holding a mirror up to these places and showing everyone what they really are. However, you know, I'm a bit more cynical than you guys, where I don't think it's because Harvard made a mistake. I think that this is the universities working as intended.